I recently spent time in the greater Kansas City area visiting microschools and learning pods and talking to founders. And I was struck by what I found. All seven of the learning environments I visited were founded within the past 3 years. And all of the founders were former public school teachers who quit and created these alternative programs. They also all expressed greater levels of personal and professional fulfillment. One of those founders is our guest today, Tara Cassidy. Tara was a public school teacher for 17 years, but grew increasingly frustrated with the institutional bureaucracy of public schooling and also wasn't happy with her children's experiences in the local schools. So in August 2022, she launched Crossroad Trails Education Center, a low-cost microschool with 8 students in a commercial storefront location that had previously housed a daycare center. And by November, she had 20 students. So, to accommodate local demand for her program, she opened up walls and expanded into an adjacent space. And Tara is now at capacity with over 30 mixed age learners in kindergarten through high school, despite no marketing or outreach efforts. So, clearly, Crossroad Trails and similar programs are in high demand, not only in the Kansas City area, but I'm seeing this trend all across the country. And I'm so thrilled, Tara Cassidy, to welcome you to the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you here. I'd love to start, Tara, with kind of the early days of what made you decide to be a teacher. Why did you go into education to begin with?
So I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher, and I often spent my summers in her classroom, playing while she was preparing. And I spent just a lot of time around it as a child. So I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. When I was that kid, when you asked me, what do you want to be? I would always say teacher. So I never even considered a different career path.
Yeah, and so then what was your journey into public schooling? I guess what positions did you hold? What was your specialty? Tell us a little bit about your experience as a public school educator for 17 years.
So I started here in Kansas City, and I was in the Hickman Middle School District, which is it would be Title I schools, low income, and I worked fourth, fifth, kindergarten. While I was there, I was usually kind of just bouncing around to fill in wherever a teacher was needed. And I kind of wanted to learn. I was in my early days, I very much had the mindset of I want to know all the grade levels and not just get stuck into one. I felt like it would make me a better teacher. Um, and in some ways, looking back, it did. It also just taught me a lot really quick. So then I actually moved to Texas, and I taught in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and I was a fifth grade teacher there. And my principal at the time, actually, so Texas has a program where you can receive certification while you're working in a different field. And my principal encouraged me to um, step out of my comfort zone and enter the special education world. So I actually did the program that was available down there, and I was in a self-contained behavior classroom. So I took on 7 students, and we were in our own little trailer outside of a school, and I grew so much in those 2 years. And so I got my certification in special education while I was working, and I had just had an amazing principal who saw that in me. I didn't know I had it in me, but saw that in me and kind of pushed me in that direction. And so at the time, I had my first daughter while I was down there, and we decided we wanted to come back to Kansas City because this is where grandparents are and family. And so we moved back to Kansas City. And while I loved those 2 years, having my own child and being a new mom and the stress of the special education world didn't feel like something I wanted to continue. And so I went into just back to regular ed, and I did third grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and kind of just bounced around again, kind of going back to what I was doing in the beginning. Um, and then my daughter has autism. And so it just led me back to the sped world. So I suddenly connected with families in a different way. And then I had my second daughter, and she has a congenital heart defect. And excuse me, I connected with the special education world in a different way. So I now had a different kind of special needs child, and I never left. I stayed in the special education world for the rest of my career. So that would have been 10 more years in special education. So
It's so interesting, Tara, because I would say that probably 75% of the education entrepreneurs that I interview on this podcast or profile in my articles are former public school teachers. And a very large percentage of those are former special education teachers. And I don't know if it's just, coincidental, or if there's something about kind of the special ed world that leads founders into kind of alternative education, maybe that focus on individualized learning. I'm curious if you have any theories or if this is just a coincidence.
I definitely don't think it's coincidence. When you're in the public ed world and you're in special education, you are the jack of all trades. You can do it all. The curriculum, you're often working with 20 plus students, all who are on individualized plans. And so you learn very quickly how to adapt and manipulate curriculum and accommodate. And the more you do that, the more you realize like this is what it should be like for all students.
Mm.
The more I did that, the more I realized like, why are my special ed students the only students that can receive these kind of services? Or what student sitting in the classroom doesn't also need something kind of like this? But I don't think it's coincidence. I think special ed teachers just have a special knack for knowing maybe how to step outside of the box of
Mm.
a curriculum that's handed to you that you teach year after year. And that third grade curriculum, and you taught it for 8 years, and you can walk in each year and do that. Special ed teachers don't get that. You get a new set of kids monthly. New kids are added all the time, and you never get set in stone with what you're doing. So I think that we're maybe just a different breed of people.
Yeah,
who
and maybe you're given, some of that creativity and customization as a special ed teacher, and then you want more of it, right? That then you realize you could have even more creativity and more opportunity to individualize learning outside of the system than inside it. And I know when I visited with you, you mentioned that one of your frustrations with the conventional public school system was that your words were that it's all paperwork and politics, meaning sort of office politics or bureaucracy. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Sort of what did you become increasingly frustrated by within the system?
So for me as a special education teacher, I had a workload that was not manageable. It was more than I could handle. And you have paras, you have people that help you, and they're amazing, but that doesn't take the workload off of you as the teacher. And the burnout is just quick. You start questioning, what am I doing? Am I really helping the kids, or am I just checking a box off of the list of the million things that I have to get done? And it increasingly felt that way. And I also got incredibly frustrated with the district that I was working in, just because I would constantly say, I can't do this. I'm out of compliance. I'm not, what do you want me to do? The paperwork or work with the kids? I can't do both. There's not enough time in the day. And, you know, they don't like to hear that. They want you to just do it all and do it with a smile. And it wasn't healthy. It wasn't okay for me. It wasn't okay for my own personal children. It wasn't okay for the kids I was supposed to be providing a service to. And it'll wear you down real quick. So in my head, I wanted to still teach, but not in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's wearing on you professionally, personally. You're seeing that the conventional system isn't working great for your children. You have four girls, is that
I
right?
have four girls.
Four girls. And so what was next? I mean, how did you even discover this idea of being a microschool founder or opening up some kind of learning center outside of the system? What was that like for you?
So when I got out of the teaching world, I started just tutoring. I knew I was never going back. I was done with the public ed world. I love teaching. Like I said earlier, that's all I've ever done, and I didn't know what else to do. But suddenly, sitting in an office cubicle where nobody talked to me and I could walk away at the end of the day might seem like an okay option. So I just started tutoring to keep some income coming in and like kind of evaluating what do I do. And at the same time, my oldest daughter was really struggling, and she had started her first year of middle school, and it wasn't good. Um, she wasn't getting accommodations met, and we were having a lot of bullying and just awful things that were going on. So we decided to pull her, and I wasn't teaching anymore, and I was just tutoring, and we didn't know what we were going to do. So we started researching private schools and quickly realized that because she had autism, because she had a 504, even though she has very high functioning autism, every private school we went to said, oh, well, I don't know if we can take her. And it was so discouraging to me because public school wasn't right for her and private schools didn't want to meet her needs. And um, the sped teacher in me was just screaming, this shouldn't be an issue. All students should be able to have a different kind of learning environment, not just kids that can afford it or are completely normal, and not kids that just work in the public school system, because some do, but mine didn't. And there wasn't another option. So one day I just kind of said to my husband, I think I might do this thing. And he knows when I say things like that, I'm probably already doing it. And I had already kind of been, we live in a kind of small town, so I already knew about this daycare that was no longer open. And I had already contacted the leasing company and kind of caught the idea. And so luckily I have a very supportive husband, and he was like, okay, like, let's do this. Let's just try it and see, you've wanted a different career path. So maybe this is it. And we started with 8 students, and it was barely enough to cover the rent, much less the bills, and I didn't get paid a dime. Um, but when we stopped and we looked at it, it was like, well, we were gonna scrape by to send her to a private school. So that money that we would have been trying to scrape by and find to send her to a private school, we're now just creating it for her. And we still don't have the money. We still don't have any of that, but it's different and it's ours and it's hers. And it could be so beneficial to other kids too. And that's how it started. I mean, it was just word of mouth. It was, this is what we're doing. I never marketed other than just creating a Facebook page and things like that. I didn't do anything. It just became word of mouth at that point. So,
Wow, how rewarding that must feel to you. Congratulations on
yeah.
just jumping in and building what you couldn't find in your community and realizing that there's so much larger demand. In fact, a lot of unmet demand now because you're at capacity for what you're doing. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what Crossroad Trails is like, because it's technically sort of a learning center for students who are identifying as homeschoolers or legally recognized as homeschoolers. They can attend part-time, full-time, it's sort of up to them, their enrollment options. They bring their own curriculum, which you sort of help facilitate and guide them on. But tell us a little bit about the structure and the day-to-day.
So our goal was to let parents be in control. Um, we, I learned as a mom who was searching for other options that what my kid needed wasn't out there. And so that was my main goal. Like, what your family needs to be available to you. So we let families pick. So we have a 2, 3, or 5-day option. And truly, there's a good mix. We have full-time students, we have part-time students. There's a good mix of that. Parents bring their own curriculum, and if they are not sure about curriculum, I have a library of curriculum that I'm happy to like provide to parents and let them borrow and use from year to year. But so students bring it, we organize their work. So it kind of takes me back to my special ed days where each week I organize the kids' work if their parents want me to. Some parents want to organize their own kids' work and have that control over their students' learning. So they organize it and they just bring it, and I help them as they're doing the work that their parent had already organized for them. And then some parents, don't feel as confident in that, so I do it for them. So I have a nice little clipboard with my list of kids, and I know who needs to do what every day, and that's what we work on. We get the work done, and then in the morning, and then after lunchtime, we use that more as alternative learning. The kids kind of get into projects and doing activities and hanging out and socializing, and we want them to do that. If the weather's nice, we've been known to go outside to the playground and be out there for an hour longer. We take walks around the neighborhood. Some of the girls got into making jewelry and learning how to do all of that kind of stuff in the afternoons. And we have a full-size kitchen this year, and so the kids have been cooking and making brownies and messes. But we want them to learn in those kind of ways too. So we kind of try and offer a mixture of both, like academic learning and all the other ways you can learn. So
great. Right. And that community kind of social space for, again, mixed age learners, kindergarten through high school. You have over 30 learners now. How many staff do you have, and how are you finding your staff?
So I have actually sort of switched up my staffing this year. And I have 2 part-time people. And so what I realized is that it can't, I got called to jury duty, and I realized, oh my gosh, if I have to be gone, I need more than one person. I can't rely on one person's shoulders if I'm gone. So we have 2 part-time people, so they just share days of the week that works for them, and they come in and they help during academic time. One of them is incredibly creative and artistic, and she does arts and crafts and all kinds of fun things that I don't have that skill set. So she does all those kinds of fun things in the afternoons with the kids. And then we also encourage parents to be able to come in and, on that jury duty day, I had a couple parents like any extra set of hands on days like that, we'll take. So we try and utilize everyone.
Yeah. And just that collaboration with parents, having parents in charge, being able to choose whatever curriculum the parent wants. It could be secular, it could be faith-based, it could be Montessori inspired, it could be self-directed, it could be classical, whatever works for the parent. And then you can also provide suggestions and recommendations if the parents want that. I just love that collaboration with families. And I'm wondering, Tara, what are you hearing from families? Why are they eager to send their kids to Crossroad Trails? What is it about their kind of current learning environment that they may not be satisfied with?
I think the biggest feedback that we've gotten is just that their kids are happy. Kids that were sad or stressed out, and they're kids, they shouldn't be stressed out. We just, that stress is gone. It's not the end of the world. Okay, this was a really bad assignment, or it was really hard. Let's just stop and we'll reconvene tomorrow. Or having the freedom to, I have one student, or I have a couple of them now actually, that they go to IOP programs. So their parents are able to send them and they get schoolwork done, and then they can go to like their intensive outpatient programs in the afternoon, and it's okay. We're not fighting attendance issues or, doing any of those kinds of things. So I think the biggest feedback I've gotten is just the ability for the kids to do what they need to do to be happy, functioning people without the stress of attendance regulation or um, the stress of you have to get 8 subjects done in one day within an hour, and if you don't get it done within that hour, you have to take it home and finish it when you get home. Like, no, you should hang out with your family when you go home. So I think that's been the biggest feedback we've gotten, is just happy kids.
Oh, and that's so important that you're seeing happy, thriving children, and that means families are happier, everyone's less stressed, and of course, that's what parents want, is for their kids to be happy and thriving. I think it's worth noting, Tara, that in Kansas, where you're located, homeschooling is relatively easy to do, and starting a private school is relatively easy to do. But it sounds like what you're saying is you don't have a desire to be a private school, that you like to offer this sort of flexibility and freedom from attendance and seat time requirements. Is that right?
Yeah, we were very deliberate in how we structured ourselves, and we worked with the HSLDA to make sure we were meeting all the requirements and not, working within the bounds of what was legal within our state. But we are fortunate. So we are a non-accredited private school, and our students are all registered as a homeschooling student, either within our school or within their family's homeschool, depending on if they're a full-time student, or if they only come 2 days a week, then they're registered through their families. But we don't want the we don't want the regulation of attendance or um, requirements as far as accreditation, with you have to do certain classes, because we truly feel like students need to learn the classes that fit their family and their lifestyle and their career path, um, because not all students want to have a college career path. And that's very much what's pushed, in the mainstream world right now, is college and career readiness. Well, the career sometimes gets left out of there, and it's a lot of college readiness and not always career. So we just try and make sure that we avoid some of those regulations and let students follow those career paths. We have 4 of our high school students right now who are enrolled at the local community college, and they're in career tech programs earning dual credit. So their classes count as their high school credits, and by the time they graduate, they will be within a few credits of having a college career degree as well. And so we feel like that path is setting them up for more success than sitting just in a classroom and getting a diploma. So that's kind of
Oh, so great. And
left.
something that homeschoolers have long appreciated as independent homeschoolers is the sort of dual enrollment, getting a head start on college and career in a much more meaningful, kind of authentic way in one's teen years than, as you say, just sort of sitting in a conventional classroom, collecting your diploma, waiting for your life to start at some kind of defined point. So Tara, your tuition is low by kind of peer standards of kind of private education options in the area. I believe you told me that it's $4,000 for full-time annual tuition. And of course you have the part-time enrollment options, which are less. And even though that is more financially affordable for more families than conventional private education options in your area, it's still out of reach for some families. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about sort of financial accessibility and what you're hearing from families.
So this year alone, we've had over 30 families who have messaged us and said, we want to come, but we can't afford it. Do you have scholarships? And last year we did, and I got the VILA grant last year, and just kind of in my mind, it's kind of by the grace of God, I used that money that I thought I would have to use in starting up this location I didn't have to use it for starting up the location, because enrollment grew so quickly. And I was able to use the money then for scholarships, and word got out that we had scholarships. And then this year hit, and I didn't have that grant and I didn't have that funding. And so I had so many families reach out this year wanting scholarship. And wanting, the emails, I want this for my child and we can't afford it. And I do keep my tuition pretty low, and I probably pay the financial strain of a business owner in doing so, but in the area we live in, it's hard. We're not an affluent community. We're not even really a big metropolitan. We're outside of the Kansas City area, but we're still a pretty small town. And so I try very hard to walk that fine line of providing it at an affordable rate, um, but also being able to function as a business. Um, and unfortunately, in Kansas, there's just nothing. There's nothing available for families. They don't have any tax credits. They don't have not a voucher system or anything that families can fall back on to say, I could use this to help me. So the one thing I did, Kansas had the KEEP program this year, which gave all families $1,000 until the funding ran out, which I think as to date it has run out. So if you met the financial guidelines, you could apply for the $1,000 for each child that was eligible and school aged. And so we worked really hard to make sure that Crossroad Trails could kind of, sort of, help families in that way. And so I kind of went back to my tutoring days before I had opened the micro school, and we offered tutoring outside of um, tuition and enrollment. We also offer tutoring now so that families, and so we're an approved provider through the KEEP program, so families can use their KEEP money and still at least get some sort of outside assistance and help and tutoring. It's not the same as tuition though. So I would love for it to change and for families to be able to use that, but we're just not there yet.
Yeah, and so many states now, especially this year in 2023, passing universal school choice policies, particularly in many of these states, education savings account programs that provide all K-12 students with a portion of state funding to use toward various private education options, including microschools and learning centers and tutoring resources and homeschool curriculum and supplies and so forth. And a lot of these states, that ESA amount is somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000 per student per year, which is even higher than what you're charging already for Crossroads. So that seems like a program like that would be a game changer for families in your community.
Yeah, it would. I mean, countless, because I've had 30 email me asking about scholarships, but how many more families are sitting at home thinking, I wish my child didn't have to do this, but they're not emailing me asking me. I'm sure there's hundreds. I'm sure there's so many families sitting there also thinking, I wish my child had a different option. And they just don't right now. And I think it's important, when you talk about like the savings accounts and the vouchers, to know it has to be all students, because that wouldn't have helped my child when we were looking at private schools and she had an IEP and the private school said we can't accommodate her. That when we're talking about, it has to be for all students, because it's so important, because you could very, very easily leave out a very vulnerable but high demand section of students out there who need an accommodation or need something. They need the funding to be able to have the alternative. And if it's only for accredited schools that follow a certain rigid outline, those students don't fit into that rigid outline. So I just think it's really important to not leave those very vulnerable students out of the opportunity to have that kind of funding.
Yeah, so that kind of universal piece, eligible to all K-12 students. And then your point as well, that on the provider side, not creating regulations and requirements that these ESA funds or voucher funds can only be used at kind of traditional or accredited schools, because it leaves out a lot of these creative, emerging, highly individualized learning programs like Crossroad Trails that are truly meeting the needs of each individual child in a different way. And I think that that's really, really important to emphasize. So, Tara, I'm curious about what you think the future holds, not only for you at Crossroad Trails and kind of all this unmet demand. What do the next few years look like for you and your expansion? And then maybe more high level, what do you see as sort of the future of education going forward, particularly as it relates to these kind of alternative out of system models?
I'm hoping, I'm hoping and praying that like we are at a crossroads. That's where we got our name, that we're just at the crossroads of like, what should education look like? And really, COVID, if it, it did so many things, but like the one thing it really did was stop and have families have the opportunity to see what education looked like and maybe start planting a seed of, does this work for my kid? Because there's probably a whole lot of families who watch their kids struggle through that and now maybe in the back of their mind have that doubt of like, what is my kid learning? What are they doing? What are they sitting in school for 8 hours doing? And could they be doing more? So I'm just hoping that that's kind of where we're at. We're at a point where families are just maybe starting to have that doubt, and that's all it takes. Just takes families starting to ask and want more. And, you know, families are the voters who change what is happening out there. And so, when families start speaking up and wanting something different, everything can change. And for me personally, it would be a game changer. Having, you know, I we just expanded, for the second time in 2 years. So I'm not really looking to expand again next year. I'm thinking I'm going to just enjoy what we have going. But, in 2, 3 years, things, look at what's changed so much in the last 2 to 3 years. Like, I think 2 to 3 years from now, could I have that? Could I have that, $6,000 to $8,000? That is more than my tuition. I could open up other locations. I could have multiple places where I'm at capacity here. I could have another location and we would be able to have the funding to do that. So I just hope that we're really at the edge of being able to provide more and hoping that families speak up and say, we want more.
I hope so too. I'm optimistic as well that that is the future of American education. There will be so many more options for families. The families will really be able to customize education in unique ways to meet the needs and preferences of their children. So to be continued, I guess. We'll have to check in a couple of years and do a follow-up story to see where you're at. Tara, I'd love to hear your advice for aspiring education entrepreneurs, maybe teachers who are currently in the classroom, who were listening to your story and find it that it resonates with them, or thinking about taking the leap into launching a microschool or a learning center or a low-cost private school. What would you give as some advice to them?
If it's on your heart, you should do it. It was big on my heart. And I think if you feel called to do it, if you feel like you have that skill set, then you should. And I'm not going to say it's easy because in a state like I am where there is no assistance or there's no way to market your business with, hey, families, you can have this money and you can use that for coming here. That makes it incredibly challenging to do. But the people are out there, the families are out there. And for all of the days that you sit in the public school classrooms and you go home at the end of the day and you're still not done working and you're mentally and physically drained and exhausted, I don't feel that way anymore. I feel mentally drained and exhausted in other ways by owning a business, but it's rewarding. I know I'm doing something and I know what I'm doing matters. And so to feel mentally drained and exhausted doesn't settle in the same way as going home after a day of paperwork or kids and feeling torn between paperwork or kids, because I always want to choose the kids, but most of the time I had to choose the paperwork, which hurts your heart. So I just don't have that anymore. The stress doesn't go away. That's just part of life. But if it's on your heart and you have the skill set, the rewards are are so much more. So I would say do it.
Ah, so great. Yeah. And great to hear that it's still incredibly challenging to be an entrepreneur, to run a small business, but that the rewards are so great. And that you may still be exhausted at the end of the day, but it's a different kind of exhaustion, and it's one that really fuels you and pushes you to do more and move ahead. So great advice there, Tara. If my listeners and viewers want to connect with you, learn more about Crossroad Trails, what is the best way for them to reach you?
So our website is www.crossroadtrails.org. And so that has like our email, our phone number, our website, all of our information, our tuition, our tutoring, all the different things that you might want to like check out and see how we do it or what we do. That would be the best way to get information on us.
Well, best wishes to you and the future growth of Crossroad Trail. Tara, Cassidy, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you for having me.